God bless you if you're one of those loyal Jets fans out there who took the time to watch week 2 of the preseason as the Jets beat the Carolina Panthers 15-12. Didn't really see the starters in this one, which that's sort of the new thing. Not so new anymore, but used to be you tune in, watch preseason, you get a quarter, maybe a half of some starting players to evaluate, which is fun. Not the case anymore. It's 90% backups, but there's still some value. There's still some stuff to be taken from this. Big difference from last week to this week, at least in my opinion, was the offensive line for the Jets. Last week, we commented on how the quarterbacks seem to have plenty of time to throw. Not the case at all today. No Tyrod Taylor. He didn't play. It was just the backups. Andrew Peasley started for the Jets under center. He goes 7 out of 11 for 33 yards, and he was just harassed all day. Didn't really have time to set up. Ran well, and I've commented in the past after watching him at Wyoming how he's a guy. He's not Lamar Jackson, but he is certainly athletic enough to pick up some yards with his legs. If I'm not mistaken, he may have actually ran for more yards than he threw for today. No, it was close. Threw for 33, ran for 25. But again, he did show the ability to run. Offensive line didn't show the ability to block. Sort of hot and cold there. We saw Carter Warren thought he would get the start at left tackle. He didn't, but Max Mitchell didn't play very long, so I don't really know where they are. The Olu Fashanu who started at right tackle, he got flagged. Carter Warren got flagged. So both tackles were hit with penalties. As I said, Max Mitchell got the start on the left side, but I don't think he played more than a series or two before Carter Warren stepped in. Obviously, we'll be able to tell more with this stuff as the All-22 comes out and we can take a closer look. But even just from the game view, naked eye, without replay and things like that, the offensive line didn't have a great day. Really, offensively, all around, all field goals for the Jets. No touchdowns today. Although Zach Kuntz had a chance at a touchdown on a ball that he just didn't keep his toes in bounds. That one was from Peasley. But Kuntz, I think the throw was a little high. I mean, it was high. I think if Kuntz had kept his toes in bounds, I'm not sure he would have been able to elevate to get to the pass. Had Peasley thrown it a little sooner or got a little bit less air under it, I think it's an easy touchdown if Kuntz keeps his feet in bounds. Either way, it's not. That's the closest the Jets came to scoring a touchdown. Adrian Martinez came on in relief for the second half. And I've said a few times now, if Martinez wants to stick, he's got to show that he's stopped turning the football over. Did a good job protecting the ball in the UFL, but his time in college threw 31 interceptions. We've talked about his ability to run, which is great, but he still can't turn the ball over. He had one ball picked off and almost another one later in the game that it was off a deflection, what would have been the second one. But again, Martinez, not a great showing, 7 out of 17 for 67 yards. Peasley, 7 out of 11 for 33. I thought Izzy Abanikanda looked all right running the ball on the ground. He was just under 5 yards a carry, 6 for 29. Braylon Allen had 8 for 27. I mentioned Peasley running the ball for 25 yards. Isaiah Davis, he only had 4 carries. I think he had the first 3 of the game, if I'm not mistaken. Not really, as you can tell by the passing numbers I just told you, obviously not a whole lot going on receiving-wise. Lance McCutcheon led the way with 25 yards. Anthony Ferkser caught a ball in the flat and was able to pick up 21 yards. So, but really, again, a bunch of, Braylon Allen, 12 yards receiving, Brandon Smith, 11. Nothing really that jumped out at you in this game. No spectacular efforts. Defensively, however, and on special teams, Johnny Jets jumps in. How are we doing, Johnny? And he says that kid looked awesome on special teams. The kid returner was awesome. He's talking about Brandon Codrington, the undrafted free agent corner, who I thought looked good last week. I commented to him on the show when Dylan Terraman and I were talking about the game. I thought Codrington jumped out a little bit on defense. Today it was on specials. 2 big returns. Second one, a really big punt return where he was able to break a tackle immediately. Don't have the distances offhand. They might be on here. I'm just taking a quick peek at the stat sheet. But in terms of, so here we go. Codrington, 1 kick return for 63, 2 punt returns for 46. So Codrington really helped his cause today. Now, look, can Codrington make the roster? It's not going to be easy because there's I commented early in the preseason or before the start of the preseason how the depth at corner for this team was really questionable because so little experience behind the starters, right? Sauce, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, yeah, best trio in the NFL. But behind them, you had Eccles, who hasn't started a game in forever. Oh, he started one last year. And then a bunch of guys who haven't played. But Stiggers has been really good. As Eccles is a proven NFL backup. He's not a lights out guy. And then everyone behind them, just a bunch of guys who haven't, Kendall Sheffield being an exception. He's, but they added him a little bit later in camp. But anyway, that, bringing us back to Codrington, listen, if he keeps making plays like this on specials, he can stick as, a primary special team guy. But it's a matter of whether or not this team feels like they have the roster spots or feel like they can give up a corner spot to him. Because you remember Justin Hardy last year, of course, was listed as a corner, but he was only a special teams player. I think his job goes to Irv Charles. I said that the moment he was cut or the moment Hardy was let go and they didn't re-sign him. I thought, well, he's going to leave and that they've got Irv Charles now to take that role. So I don't know if they have another role there for a guy who's only special teams. Wonder what Brant Boyer's thinking about right now. Look, Boyer's he's gonna pound the table for whoever he wants. We've talked about Isaiah Davis. We've talked about the fact that the Jets have highlighted him as a guy who they believe will be a core special teams guy. Let's see. New kickoff will help the Jets a lot. Well, that remains to be seen, my info. It's going to help everyone a little bit because let's face it, kickoffs have become a non-factor. Teams just didn't return kicks the last couple of years with the way things were drawn up or with the way the rules were laid out. Now with these new rules, we are going to see some returns. They will help the Jets, but still got to cover them. So we'll know at the end of the year if it was a net gain or net negative or net positive for the Jets special teams. You hope the expectation should be with Brant Boyer. He's a fantastic special teams coach. The expectation should be that it will ultimately help the Jets, but we won't know about that until the season plays out. Defensively, we saw more good there than we did on offense. Again, in a 15-12 game, that's going to be the case. We'll mention a few standouts here, guys who I thought played really well. Zaire Barnes, who I mentioned last week. And it's funny. I mentioned Barnes last week as having a good game. Went back, and he didn't make as many plays as I sort of envisioned during the game. But, he was always around the ball. Today, a lot more active. 7 tackles, 3 solo, 4 assists. He did a really nice job. I thought Stiggers again on a really big tackle a couple times. He shows he doesn't back down. He's a big time hitter from the corner spot. Will McDonald with an early sack where, listen, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm not freaking out over the Hassan Reddick thing. I think Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson and Quinnen Williams and all these other guys up front are going to do a fine job of getting to the quarterback and making plays. Tack McKinley, no sacks today, but again, we saw several plays today, same as last week, where you see really good get-off, where Tack McKinley, if he's a depth piece, that's fine. I'm not sitting here saying Tack McKinley will be Hassan Reddick and he's going to get you 10 sacks. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that this Jets D-line, with their depth and with their philosophy of, keeping guys fresh and swapping guys out, I think a guy like McKinley could have a nice year for them. I think for somebody like that, 6 sacks is a good year. If you bring McKinley and he gets you 5, 6, there's nothing wrong with that because you just, again, we talk about it all the time. We talk about it with Hassan Reddick. The reason why the draft compensation thresholds don't worry me with Reddick is because he's going to have a really hard time hitting those benchmarks with the Jets, be it sacks or playing time, because the Jets don't give guys a ton of playing time, which will keep his sack totals down. So I don't see Hassan Reddick being a guy, once he does come in, being a guy who's going to hit those thresholds to make it a second-round pick. But again, McKinley looked good coming off the edge. Will McDonald looked good coming off the edge. We know we've got a good player in JJ. You know what you've got in Quinnen. Braden McGregor played good last week. I believe Dylan Terman, we talked about it this week, kind of maybe a practice squad guy. I can't even remember. And I don't think I had him on my 53. But I think it came down to him and Eric Watts, and I gave it to Watts. because Watts is a little bit bigger and probably has a little more versatility. Maybe move him inside a little bit. People have talked about how maybe he's the future JFM with him being gone. But if we're talking about just pure pass rush ability off the edge, I thought he looked good today. He had back-to-back plays, one that I tweeted out. He beat the tackle, got to the quarterback, and as he grabs the quarterback and tries to spin him around, he actually kind of accidentally leans the quarterback on the tackle he just beat. And that helps the quarterback stay upright as McGregor falls to the ground, doesn't get the sack. If the tackle isn't there for the quarterback to lean on, it's a sack. And he flips the ball, gets stopped short of the first down, so they end up punting. So it was an impact play. He broke up the play, forced the quarterback to panic, scramble, flip it for a short gain. So Braden McGregor had a couple of really good reps today. And before those reps, I saw Dan Leberfeld, Jets Whispers, tweeting about how he thought McGregor was having himself a good game, a good camp. And he really is. He really has been. Chaz Surratt, my guy, who I kept off the roster on the 53 the other day because I think, and I didn't mention this. I'm glad Gus Doon on Twitter mentioned this, about Surratt's durability. And that was a big factor in why I didn't have Surratt making the roster, because as much as I love the guy and, I picked him to make the roster last year, and I'm not saying he won't this year. I hope he does. But last week, after a play, he was slow getting up. He did eventually get up and came back in the game. But that was that sort of reminder that for a guy who hasn't played a ton of football, who hasn't gotten on the field a whole lot, Surratt gets hurt a lot. And that was a part of my thinking in giving, saying that I think Barnes gets the roster spot, Zaire Barnes. But I'd be happy with either guy. I think Surratt probably the slightly better player. Barnes being a little younger, maybe the higher ceiling, possibly more durable. But I just think GMs love rostering their picks, and that's just across the board. Listen, if it's not close, they're going to go with the far better player. But if they feel like two guys are neck and neck, I think they go with the pick. Who's the backup QB when the season started? Well, it's going to be Tyrod Taylor will be the backup. If you're talking about QB3, I like Peasley more than I like Martinez because of the turnovers. And I think Jordan Travis, this is just a gut feeling. I think they're going to IR him because he's not going to see any action in the preseason, it appears. He's still working, stretching every day at this point. But I think that I like Peasley better than Martinez. Martinez, as I said, the turnover history. Now, Peasley played a million years. They both played a bunch of college football, but Peasley was a backup for most of his college career. Didn't really start till his second to last year. And in his final year, threw like 20 touchdowns to 5 picks. Way better, way better than anything we saw from Adrian Martinez in college. Now, Martinez had a nice year in the UFL. So how much that weighs, we'll see. But again, today threw the pick, almost threw a second pick. So I think Peasley wins that job if they decide to go that route, if they decide they're going to give one of the UDFAs, the QB3, or maybe a practice squad spot. But really, I would have no issue, and I think we discussed this on the show about the 53. If they decide to keep Peasley and Martinez on the practice squad, and you can say, well, Glenn, there's only so many reps to go around and practice for these guys, that many quarterbacks. I don't care. Listen, if Joe Douglas wants to start a quarterback factory, as he puts it, which he should, I love the concept, love the thought. If you have a guy who only gets mental reps and he's only in the classroom, better than nothing. Better than, at least in my mind, better than carrying, instead of having 3 or 4 O-linemen on the practice squad and 10 or 11 on the roster, have one less O-lineman, one less. You have 17 practice squad spots now. It used to be like 11, 10. So there's a lot more spots now to carry guys. I would have no problem if they carried a couple quarterbacks. We'll see what happens there. Again, Peasley versus Martinez at this point. I thought tonight Peasley kind of got the short end of the stick. He was under a lot more pressure. At least it seemed that way sometimes. Sometimes you're watching the game, you're like, oh, this is how it happened. And then you go back and rewatch the All-22, and it's like, oh, maybe it was equal. Maybe it wasn't as imbalanced as it seems. But to me, it certainly seemed as if we saw Peasley on the run almost immediately a lot more. And this is after, again, having said last week, one of my biggest takeaways was how much time the quarterbacks had, which is nice for a change, Because really with a lot of teams, but especially with the Jets over the past however many years, seems like the O-line is that you're so bad during the regular season. What are the odds your second, third, fourth stringers are going to be really good? So the preseason quarterbacks have just been getting their heads kicked in. Rich says he thinks they carry more running backs. Do you mean 4, Rich? Is that what you're saying? Because we've had that conversation a few times. I did an article a few weeks ago saying, do you carry 4? Do you make Isaiah Davis your primary special teams guy and carry Izzy Abanikanda as a 4th back? And I that's what I hope, because I love Izzy. Like I said, thought he looked good today. Had a couple of decent runs. I forget. Again, there wasn't a whole lot of offense all around, so it's not like anybody put up any big numbers. But yeah, as I said earlier, Izzy goes 6 carries for 29, so a decent day for him. There was a little bit of blocking. I don't necessarily disagree, Rich. I didn't have Izzy on the 53, but listen, when you're doing those 53s, you're taking guys out, putting guys on. If I made a 53-man roster every day for 5 days, they'd look different every day. It's kind of how you're feeling in that moment. And as I said on the show, I left Izzy off and I left Surratt off because I didn't want to. I felt as if that would be my bias playing too heavily, because I loved the Izzy out of college. Been raving about Surratt for a while. Love his brother Sage as well, who was a receiver for Wake Forest. Was a tight end in the UFL, I think, most recently. But anyway, yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, do I really think this guy's going to make it, or is this just my bias because it's a player I really like? So I kind of laid off, but I should just threw him on there. I mean, it's not like they're not good enough to make the roster. Yeah, difficult choices. Good cornerback, linebacker too. Linebacker, another guy, Sam Eguavoen, who we really haven't talked about. And for me, that's primarily because I think, again, as I said earlier, I think Joe Douglas is going to want to keep the younger guys, the guys he drafted. I mean, I know he didn't draft Surratt, but he's been around a little bit longer than Eguavoen with the Jets anyway. Well, I'd have to check that because Eguavoen, of course, joined them late. Can't remember now if it was last year or the year before, after playing for the Dolphins as a core special teamer. But you just keep hearing in camp that Eguavoen's playing really well. And to me, the first 2 games, he's jumped out a little bit. He's played well. So really, you have several linebackers on this team who are playing well right now and not a lot of spots to give up. How many are you going to carry? 4 or 5? And you know who your starters are, obviously, and Sherwood's your primary backup. So you might have, at most, 2 linebacker spots up for grabs, possibly 1. And it's Barnes, Surratt, Eguavoen. And there might be somebody else I'm leaving out who's in the running. Off the top of my head, Lincoln Sefcik, we talked about him. Dylan had him as a guy making, and he was another one. I didn't put Sefcik on there because it felt like it was going to be a bias because I've talked him up a little bit this offseason, and we didn't see him do a whole lot last week. But had a couple of good blocks today. Had a key block on a run from Izzy Abanikanda along with Malachi Corley. Both sort of got to the second level and kept guys away from Abanikanda on the right side of the or on a run to the right side. But I like Sefcik. Dylan had Sefcik making the roster. I think it's going to be Sefcik or Ferkser. I think they want to keep a fullback / tight end, and with Ferkser being the veteran, I don't know if they're going to lean that way. I mean, Sefcik, if I'm not mistaken, got the first reps today, which is good. I want to see them go with the younger, more athletic guy. I think he's going to be a really good blocker. I think he's a guy who's got a better shot than most people, because he's not somebody you see a lot of folks talking about as a potential as a guy who's potentially rostered or who could be a rostered player. But either way, he did a nice job today as a blocker. He had 1 target, I believe, and it was the DB came over his back and batted it away before he could come up with it. So no catch there. But and the other tight end, again, Ruckert, Conklin, the starter. Well, Yeboah may have played a little bit today. I can't remember now. No, I don't think he did. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember him playing. They sat 38 guys, didn't dress for the game. So, and like I said, that's what it's become. It's it really is backups versus backups, which kind of hurts a little bit. Rich says he played. Yeah, I'm envisioning one play where I think he was targeted over the middle. And then I was starting to think of later in the game when the other tight end, Johnson, was targeted over the middle. But I think Yeboah saw a target early on. Thanks for that there, Rich. But it was, again, it's, one, and I think it was on a short pass over the middle. But either way, it's backups versus backups. And it's not, if you're sort of just looking for players and stars, you're not going to see those guys this time of year, which can get a little bit frustrating for fans that aren't sort of into this, like 1 through 90, every guy on the roster who's going to make it. But again, like I said, there was some good things to take away today, primarily on special teams. As I said the other day, after he hit the game winner, the Jets are clearly, in my mind, they're showcasing Austin Seibert. They let him come on and hit the game winner last week, and then this week they let Zerline hit one, and then Seibert made all the kicks after that. Excuse me. He went 4 for 4, including a 52-yarder. So this is a guy, he's going to get poached if you don't keep him on your roster. So I imagine what we'll see, a team that needs a kicker. More than one team will probably need one. So you're not going to want to get into a bidding war, and maybe the Jets get a 6 or a 7 for Seibert, which would be nice. I'm trying to, because he had all of his kicks last week. Thomas Morstead, 2 punts for 103 yards, 53, average of 53 per. Nothing surprising there. Isaiah Davis didn't do much as a return man. 2 punt returns for 14 yards. Corley had one kick return for 19. Thinking about, Al Blades, meant to mention that one. Al Blades had an interception go right through his hands. Ball was thrown right to him. No way he shouldn't have come down with that. But he did not. But the Jets win. Not exactly a thrilling victory with nothing but field goals. Again, the one shot at a touchdown. Throw was slightly off target to Kuntz. But they get the win. We get some more film on some of these young guys. We'll get take a look at some of these guys on, especially the O-line on the All-22. Real quick, Dano says, can we get anything out of Seibert? Seems trivial to give him 1 out of 90 spots as a favor to showcase him for others. No, Dano, I think that's the plan. I think the plan is the Jets saying, let's roster this guy. Let's let him make a bunch of kicks in the preseason. And then if a team that needs a kicker on cutdown day, if they want to give us a draft pick, it's a free draft pick. I don't see why not. I don't see it's kind of a, as far as I'm concerned, a free pick. Now we'll see if it plays out that way. If they end up not, if nobody calls, if teams don't want to give a pick for a kicker, then you'll see if the Jets put him on the practice squad, because really, I think the Jets have been burned at kicker enough over the last few years that they think keep him if you need him for a week or two at some point, or trade him and get a free pick. Rich says, how impressed with the coaching of these young guys. I like it. Yeah, listen, and again, as we've seen in recent years, the defensive staff is doing a really nice job bringing these guys along. Offensively, some of these offensive guys, they are really raw. And like a guy like Braylon Allen, I don't know how much of that you put down to coaching. He's just is what he is. You put him on any team in the league, he's going to be one of the biggest, most powerful dudes on the field, and he's going to run straight ahead and run guys over. Dano says he likes the idea of keeping him, that being Seibert, because he punted and kicked in college. Again, one more reason to hang on to him. Like I said, I would have no problem with the Jets keeping him, but I would just be surprised if they did to use a roster spot, because again, if you put him on a practice squad, he's getting poached. But right now he's a guy that they're going to try to swap. Rich says corner play has been good. It has. It's been very good. Like I said at the start of camp, I said the Jets have some questions in terms of depth, because they just it wasn't a matter of talent. It was a matter of, if you looked up and down the roster at their corners, like who has played how many NFL games, and there was a lot of zeros, right? Bartholomew 0, Codrington 0. Yes, Eccles 15 or 16, but all but one of those games was a few years ago. So, again, Stiggers 0, Jarek Bernard Converse played a few snaps at safety, so 0 at corner. So it was Sauce, Reed, Carter, and then 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Again, with the exception of Eccles. So early on, it felt like they're going to have to get someone to step up at corner, but a lot of guys have done a really nice job. So, it's a little tough to judge because they're not facing high level quarterbacks and receivers at this point. Although Jalen Daniels wasn't bad, and Jarek Bernard Converse looked really good against him last week. He, by the way, left the game early, I believe, with a hamstring, which is a shame. You hate to see guys playing well have to leave. I mean, anyone, of course, but when a guy's trying to make his mark and make a roster and get his foot in the door, like JBC, Irv Charles left, I believe it said hip injury. He left, and we may have hopped on live before. Yeah, we may have hopped on live before that. I don't know if they gave a presser and an update of any kind. But biggest takeaway of the day to me, I know it was just one play, but the Will McDonald sack, another fantastic spin move. I think he's going to be able to use that reliably throughout the season. And he can bend a little bit, get around the edge too. He's not a guy who can only do one thing. It's just the thing he does best. That spin move really does stand out. So good job by him. Some really good efforts today on defense. Offense, the line will have to wait for film. Not much from the quarterbacks and the receivers, because from what we did see from the line, especially early on, not a lot of good stuff. Carolina was able to do a really good job of getting pressure on the quarterback. That'll wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans. We'll catch you again this week, maybe a couple times. If we get any breaking news, we'll hop on. Have a good one, Jets fans.